Certainly one of the most anticipated horror films to come out in the next couple of months is A24's Opus, starring Ayo Edebiri and John Malkovich. So in this one, and if you've seen the trailer you'll know, a group of journalists are invited to a remote compound where a reclusive pop star played by Malkovich plans to unveil his first album in 30 years. However, when they arrive, they realize the artist has built himself a cult, which may or may not mean harm to the assembled journalists. Now, you can tell that Opus's writer-director Mark Anthony Green is a former entertainment journalist, and indeed he spent years working for GQ. Having participated in my share of junkets and set visits part of my work with JoBlo, there certainly is something surreal about being taken into an entertainer's orbit. It's an exhilarating experience, and Green, who's clearly experienced this many times himself, minds it really beautifully in the film's first half, where a young writer at a music magazine, Ariel, played by Ayo Edebiri, unexpectedly gets invited to singer Alfred Moretti's compound as he unveils what's supposed to be a musical masterpiece. Now, the first hour of the film, which is light on the horror aspects being teased by A24, works very well as a kind of satire of modern entertainment journalists and the relationships they have with the entertainers they write about. Malkovich is at his very best in an atypical piece of casting. Who would ever imagine him as the world's greatest pop star? Yet Malkovich, who actually cut several tracks with Nile Rodgers of Chic and The Dream, pulls it off really well, with him looking like he's having the time of his life playing a kind of new wave version of Vincent Price. Everyone seems in on the joke, with the performances fairly broad across the board, with Murray Bartlett, a veteran entertainment journalist, and Ariel's boss, who's an old hand at rockstar debauchery, while Juliette Lewis plays a gossip columnist who has a history with Moretti. The first part of the film is a ton of fun, but for me it really starts to go off the rails when the horror aspect kicks in. As the trailer reveals, Moretti's the head of a new age kind of cult, and soon the journalists realize they've been lured to the retreat for sinister reasons. However, we've seen an awful lot of cult movies over the years, and I have to say they've been done a lot better. Everything from Midsummer to The Sacrament, and even the recent Blink Twice, is a lot better than this, at least as far as horror or thrills go. The genre parts, when they kick in, feel like kind of an afterthought, as nothing really kind of scary happens until about an hour into this movie. It kind of feels like Green shoehorned his rather fun satire into a horror film, and the mix is very uneven. Opus actually works better when it plays out as kind of a music-driven version of The White Lotus. Ayo Edebiri, who's incredible on The Bear, does her best with what amounts to a fairly two-dimensional final girl role, with her as the only journalist at the compound who finds the fact that this 90s pop star has a cult of personality built up around him unusual. Despite being our protagonist, she's also a frustratingly passive heroine, even once Moretti's retreat becomes deadly. The one who's really having fun in this one is definitely Malkovich. Another problem with Opus's detour into horror, other than the lack of originality, is the fact that it's not scary at all. Look, I love horror movies, but you gotta scare me, right? Or at least you gotta try and scare me. Opus really just kind of felt like assembly line as far as the horror goes. Nothing here happens that you haven't seen a million times before, and once the carnage starts going, it just becomes predictable, with very little in the way of inspired chaos. It also has a very anticlimactic ending that tries to explain away the motivations behind the entire plot, but this doesn't amount to all that much, ending the film, for me anyway, on a sour note. All in all, Opus turned out to be a bit of a disappointment considering the talent involved. It's still a decent first film for Green, who certainly has a promising voice as a director, but the fact is the last 40 minutes of the movie don't live up to the promise of the first hour of the film, which really is a ton of fun. As such, Opus is a letdown, but I have to say that first hour is still very good, so it is still worth watching, especially for A24 fans, of whom there certainly are many. I'm sure a lot of you listening to this are huge fans.
Before we continue with our video, here's a reminder to click the Store tab on any of our JoBlo channels and browse our collection of the latest and freshest designs in our merch store. Go get you some.
So if you go in expecting more of a satire, you'll probably like this more than if you go in expecting anything scary. At the end of the day, I give this a pretty disappointing 6 out of 10. I was wavering between a 5 and a 6, but that first half of the movie really is quite good, so this gets a marginal pass for me. That said, it was a letdown.
Thank you for clicking on our video, everybody. If you like what you saw here, please make sure you like the video and subscribe and share with your friends who like this sort of content. JoBlo remains an independent company, and we appreciate all of your support.